All right, today I'm going to be reading out of Ungifted by Gordon Corman. I'm going to be reading the chapter entitled Unwelcome, Donovan Curtis, and I'm going to break this one into two parts, okay, because it's kind of a long one. Here we go, part one, Unwelcome, Donovan Curtis. I was pretty good at video games, but never had I felt more comfortable with a joystick in my hand than when I was driving Tin Man. The robot was like an extension of my will. The slightest twitch of my finger and he was instantly obedient to the controller. It was as if my every thought could make him dance. For once we weren't in the lab. With the state robotics meet barely a week away, it was time to simulate competition conditions. The team had spent all morning converting the gym into a perfect copy of the Duchess Auditorium, where the tournament would take place. Tin Man moved back and forth, accepting inflated rings from Abigail and placing them on the pegs we had attached to the gym's climbing apparatus. We'd even set up the pit, which would serve as our headquarters at the meet. It supplied everything from tools and spare parts for Tin Man to a cooler of Ungifted, a high-energy drink that, according to Noah, hydrated faster than Gatorade. Most of the team was gathered around Oz, their eyes panning back and forth from the robot to the teacher's stopwatch. They let out an audible groan when I raised one of the rings too high and had to stop the robot to lower the mechanism down to the peg. That cost us time for sure. Easy, Donovan, the teacher cautioned. Remember, you've got a stronger motor in the forklift. At last, Tin Man placed the final ring, swung around, and headed for the starting position. The stopwatch beeped and Oz called out our time. Best we've ever done, people, even with a few hiccups. This is going to be our year, Luttrell crowed. We broke out the Ungifted and toasted Tin Man and one another. Chloe had brought brownies, so it was kind of a party. It actually reached the point of some good-natured trash talk directed toward Cold Spring Harbor and how Tin Man was going to leave their robot lying in the dust. Of course, our team members were too polite for real trash talk, so I had to show them how it was done. Their hunk of junk doesn't stand a chance against Tin Man. Their hunk of junk wouldn't stand a chance against Tin Man's grandmother. Well, Tin Man can't have a grandmother, Noah interjected. A machine is not a living entity and has no familial line. That's probably why I never ran into any robots on Ancestry.com. We get the point, Oz put in, grinning. Let's keep it to ourselves. It's a little premature for a victory celebration. Well, there's no way Cold Spring Harbor can match the kind of times we're putting up, Kevin enthused. Not unless they're running their robot on rocket fuel. I'd never been much of a joiner, so this was my first taste of how it felt to be a part of a team that was a real contender. And not just a part. With the robot completed, I was more important than any of them. All those geniuses and the one person who could make Tin Man perform at championship level was the dummy who got stranded in the gifted program by mistake. I didn't have a clue how to design, build, or program a robot, but it was up to me to bring home the gold. For the first time since I'd landed at the academy, I truly belonged. The heavy metal gym door was thrown open with such violence that it pounded against the cinder block wall. There, framed in the light from outside, was nothing less than an avenging angel, Dr. Schultz. I swear he crossed the gym in 3 gigantic strides, shooting sparks from his eyes. I considered running, but what for? Even if I could manage to escape, where did I think I could go? I was completely and totally busted. Dr. Schultz, what a surprise, said Oz. You're just in time to see us put Tin Man through his paces. Well, that will have to wait for another time. The superintendent's voice got colder than his expression, if possible, and the eyes fell on me. Donovan Curtis, your parents are on the way. Chloe was the first to clue in to the gravity of what was going on. Donovan might not be gifted in the same way as rest of us, but he is the heart and soul of our team. He is the heart and soul of our class. Dr. Schultz regarded her sternly. Donovan's problems go far beyond trying to be what he's not. I followed him out of the gym, while the squawking and protesting of my teammates rang off the rafters. He drives the robot! We're dead without him! He is so gifted! He brought us Katie! He showed me YouTube! He's one of us! Their support would have made me feel good, if I hadn't been on my way to the end of the world. I scrubbed hard with the polishing cloth, and Madagascar got a little shinier. Maybe. It was so dark in the sub-basement of the administration building that it was hard to tell Africa from South America. I was in the dungeon, or at least the closest thing they had to a dungeon in the Hardcastle School District. My sentence was to polish up the bronze world I had knocked off Atlas's shoulders all those weeks ago. The worst part wasn't the polishing. It was chipping off years of bird droppings that had ossified by a chemical process that I'll bet even Noah Euclid couldn't explain. It was all useless, of course. There was no way Schultz was going to put this thing up again. Not after what had happened. But he wanted it perfect and gleaming in its hiding place. Actually, what he really wanted was for me to suffer. Believe it or not, cleaning the celestial sphere as part of 20 hours of community service was my only punishment for everything that had happened. My family was not going to have to pay for repairs to the Hardcastle gym. I was off the hook, a survivor, just like my ancestor James Donovan, when he climbed out of the icy North Atlantic and into the lifeboat. Whacking the statue with a branch had been a dumb thing to do, but in the end it fell within the range of normal wear and tear. The rusted bolt was at fault, not me. Now, the only question was, would the insurance company pay for a design flaw from a foundry that no longer existed? "You got off easy, Donovan Curtis," the superintendent had told me sternly at the meeting with my parents. "I hope you realize that this could have gone a lot harder on you." He called me by my full name, almost as if he was afraid he might forget it again. I couldn't blame him. These past weeks must have been like chasing a ghost. That's probably why he was so animated when he added, "I suppose I don't have to tell you that you are no longer a student at the Academy for Scholastic Distinction." Seated between Mom and Dad, I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. I didn't much care about the Academy. I'd never belonged there in the first place, but it hurt to be off the robotics team. My mother cried. But that wasn't exactly breaking news. She cried whenever anybody got voted off the island on reality TV. I understood her disappointment. As of today, I wasn't gifted anymore. Not only that, but I was responsible for the biggest town disaster since the famous gas line explosion of 1986, which ruptured a drainage pipe and filled the Hardcastle Public Library with raw sewage up to the second floor. Worse still was how Dad took it in stride. Some of that might have been his good mood at finding out he wasn't going to have to foot the bill for a new gym. Mostly, though, it said he had never truly believed I was gifted in the first place. His only comment was, "Do you think turpentine will take that bumper sticker off the car?" I never gave much thought to the fact that me being at the academy had been such a big deal to him, but for some reason it bugged me that he wasn't more upset to learn that the whole thing was a sham. "You always suspected, huh, Dad?" He was quiet for a moment, and then, "You know that website you like? The one about ancestors and great-granduncles and old-time relatives? Well, I did my share of that kind of poking around when I was your age." That didn't make sense. They had Ancestry.com when you were a kid? Well, back then they called it a library. But if you go through enough microfiches, you can learn the same things. The names you dig up, I've heard most of them before. Irish forebears who moved to America, Canada, England, Australia, places like that. Amazing. Still couldn't explain why I did the things I did, but at least now I understood why I turned to Ancestry.com to look for answers. Well, all those people went on to different jobs, he continued. Teacher, construction worker, lawyer, gravedigger, even a mayor and a couple of city councilmen. As far as I can tell, they all lived satisfying, happy, productive lives. But you know what? Not one of them was especially gifted. Think about that. And maybe you'll see why I'm not so crushed about this. What matters, the only part I really care about, is that you are happy. Now, it was an impressive speech for a normally quiet guy like my dad. There's only one problem. I wasn't happy. In fact, I was pretty far from it. It was completely out of my control, but I felt like I was letting the robotics team down. For sure, Tin Man wasn't going to win anything with Abigail at the joystick. Worse, Katie was quitting human growth and development. "If they boot my brother, they boot me too," she said stoutly. "Who says you're not gifted?" You do, I replied honestly, and it's the truth. Come on, Katie, it wasn't the kids who kicked me out. They're still 14 hours short for their credit. They'll have to go to summer school. That's tough, she snapped. Summer school will be good for them. Let them see how the other half lives. What could I say? She was supporting me. Strange, she should choose to start now. I felt bad, but I had to let it go. Dr. Schultz had spelled it out. That place wasn't my life anymore. In the real world, it never had been. And that's the end of part 1 of this chapter. I'll be back with part 2.